Welcome to the Science and Paranormal with Dr. Yana and Dr. Elliot, where science meets the unexpected, where we delve deep into the mysteries that straddle the line between scientific inquiry and paranormal. Get ready for a mind-altering journey as we embark on this phenomenal discovery together on United Public Radio Network 107.7 FM.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Science and the Paranormal. We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM out of New Orleans, and also on Roku TV. I'm here tonight with the beautiful Dr. Yana. I'm Dr. Elliot. We have two very special guests tonight. We have Tony Rathman and Ron Yacovetti. Did I say that right?
Yacovetti, that is correct. I still struggle with it, and I've had it for years, so that was excellent.
Welcome, guys. Tonight we're going to talk about spirit voices, electronic voice phenomena, but I'll let Dr. Yana formally introduce you guys.
Yeah, well, in order to formally introduce you, I have to pronounce your name how it was in the original sense. So it is not the Yacovetti, it's Yacovetti.
Now, so if I could get everybody to do that, that was awesome.
Yacovetti. Yeah. So that is incredible. Yes, fantastic to guest today. And Ron Yacovetti, he is the author of Paranormally Speaking, Knowingly Talking to the Unknown. And today we'll be speaking knowingly about the unknown, ITC Technomancy, the magical world of electronic spirit communication, and TDSI, the Digital Seance Initiative. Ron Yacovetti began investigating the paranormal during his 14 years as a resident of Los Angeles, California, just a couple of hours from me. He continues to do innovative afterlife research and experimentation rooted in the European methodology of ITC, known as DRV, direct radio voice. I'm like, with all these acronyms, DRV, ITC, which through the removal of any radio has evolved into what he, Lourdes Gonzalez, Tony, and Shira Rathman now call the Staticom project. Did I pronounce it correctly? Staticom project, producing anomalous vocals out of pure white noise. Over years of research into audio phenomena, Ron believes we need to not only focus more on the study of the consciousness, but also philosophy if we are to ever influence the mainstream physicalist science world. Instantiation. Okay, it was a Yacovetti. Now, why are you pulling all this interesting words into here? I'm having a difficulty to pronounce it. Instantiation and open up genuine acceptance to the reality of these inexplicable events the world over. He believes that our collective works in this field built upon a foundation of analytic idealism, the concept of reality of nature as being mentation. What is mentation? Now, this is a second complicating. What is a mentation? You're going to have to explain it to me.
Okay.
Or experiential makes what we view as supernatural to instead a quite natural. And Tony Rathman is a founder and lead investigator, Entity Voices Paranormal Investigations, developer of the silent EVOX 2.0 spirit boxes. He investigated hundreds of locations across the country as well as overseas in Japan and the Philippines. EVP ITC Specialist researcher currently developing Staticom, the newest method of spirit communication, based on the 40 years of work from Fredrich Jurgenson and Marcello Bacci. The Rathmans continue to evolve and refine Staticom techniques for both longer, clearer, and more understandable communication. When the actual radio was removed from the process, the term DRV, or direct radio voice, was changed to Staticom, which now produces two-way communication using only broadband white noise. This is so interesting and a mouthful of words and noises, all kinds of noises that I. So, what is that the word now, Ron? Which one was it? Mentation, or being mentation or experiential. What's mentation?
Mentation is mental processes, thought. The concept behind analytic idealism is that reality, ontologically, is mental processes, not mine or yours, but mentation just in general, mental processes.
So experiential.
Yes.
Mentation or experiential. Okay, that makes sense. This is so very interesting. How did you, gentlemen, began your interest in this field? What happened to you?
Well, mine got started because of my wife. My father was a physics, chemistry professor. And, you know, everything I asked as a kid, Dad, why is the sky blue? Well, it's because the sunlight hits water vapor. Blue is the most reflective color, so that's why the sky looks blue. Never spirits, never ghosts, none of that. My wife got me into it, tricked me on a Valentine's Day. She said she wanted to do something different. I said, okay, what do you want to do? She goes, I want to go ghost hunting. And I was like, oh, uh-oh. Well, I had two choices, take her or have her mad at me until next Valentine. So I took her. She had a great time, but when she got the stuff home and started going through it, there were things in pictures that weren't there when we took them. But the main thing that caught my attention was EVP. There were voices responding to the questions we asked. We were the only two there. Should not have been happening, but yet we were getting answers. And I was absolutely fascinated by that. So we started out with EVPs. We did that for a couple of years. Then we got into spirit boxes and ITC. Then we started building them. We built spirit boxes for about 12 years until Ron and Lourdes showed us something called direct radio voice, which I'll let him explain. And that kind of led up to where we are today with making the Staticom project.
Interesting. So Ron, how did you end up getting involved with this and building upon what Tony just spoke about?
So I got started. I did live in Los Angeles for 14 years. I'm in New Jersey now, where I'm originally from. And during that time out there, I got involved with paranormal investigating, like a lot of people these days do. I was immediately bitten by the bug of communication. Of course, EVP is so interesting every time it happens. But I was at the Glen Tavern Inn in Santa Paula, California, with 30-something people on the top floor, and they were doing a Spirit Box SB7 session, which to me was completely foreign. And I watched everybody introduce himself, and it finished with, I don't know if the actor Chad Lindbergh, he was in the Fast and Furious movies. He did a paranormal show with John L. Tenney, and he introduces himself last. He goes, and hi, I'm Chad. And 15, 20 seconds or so afterwards, a voice came out of that, completely jumping above the static sweep, and it went, I know Chad. And I was like, what is this racket, and how do I get involved? What is he holding? And it was fascinating to me that something in real time responded and said his name. Radio reception or not, the timing and relevance of that was uncanny. So I was immediately interested in that. Tony's EVOX 2.0, you mentioned in the beginning that in his intro that he built, they were some of the best ghost boxes I've ever seen because they ran completely silent unless vocals did come out. So I love that idea. And ITC, or instrumental transcommunication, was really defined over the last 20-something years by people who built ghost boxes or spirit boxes. That became what I call the Q-tip of the paranormal, because the Q-tip is actually a cotton swab, but that method became synonymous with the ghost box. So now when people think ITC, they think sweeping ghost box. And I don't have the skills that Tony does. He just built a car the other week, for crying out loud. I can't build things. If I was soldering things weekly, I would be high-fiving people with fewer fingers. So I don't. But I wanted to contribute to this area of study. It was fascinating. And I came across, from Europe, direct radio voice, or DRV. Marcello Bacci, who you mentioned in my bio, most famous for doing it. He didn't create it. Fredrich Jurgenson is the pioneer or the father of direct radio voice. And I was stunned at the efficacy of the method where these people were using just pure white noise on a vacant AM shortwave, longwave channel, no sweeping, and they were having conversations like we're talking. There was an interaction at a level that I'd never seen a spirit box or a ghost box do. And I looked at my partner, Lourdes. I went, I don't know why nobody's doing this, which I later realized is because in America, if it's not on TV, it pretty much doesn't exist. So I thought this is something worth exploring, and I'd like to see if we can match, even come close to what they were doing. So we started doing it. We did heterodyning frequencies, blending, mixing boards, tone generators, tried everything. And eventually we came upon what is now the modality for what we do with Staticom, which is we took everything that gets done in review with phenomenal evidence in the audio category, slowing it down, denoising it, amplifying it. And we did all of that instead of when we go home, when the conversation's over, and we do it at the moment of contact to make the voices more discernible. So that was kind of the foundation for it. And then I was mentored into this by Dr. Annabel Cardoza, who's in Spain now. And she is, if I'm not mistaken, the last surviving of the original guard of vocal phenomenon researchers in Europe. Right. Bacci, Jurgenson, Konstantin Radové, who was also a Jungian philosopher. They're all gone now, so she is the only one left. And so we took the mantle and ran with it. And then fast forward a couple years into doing it, we partnered up with the Rathmans. And that was really on a personal level, because they're the kindest people and genuine. And something you won't know about him if somebody doesn't tell you is that, the spirit boxes it's a marketplace. People do build them and sell them. Tony was the only guy I ever met who made something so well built that performed, and he wasn't selling them because he was genuinely interested in the research. And that, to me, for a partnership endeavor, spoke volumes. So this was a good-hearted guy with genuine intention, not looking for likes, clicks, and follows. And he did something that was really impressive. So we partnered up, and then now this Staticom project we have really saw leaps and bounds when the Rathmans got involved.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you guys reached out to me with the Staticom and sent me a few links to review. I certainly did some research on it. One of the first things I did is go to your guys' website to see if you sell the product, which you don't, because I have an audio engineer on my team. I run a nonprofit organization, Paranormal Phenomena Research Investigation, and I have a audio engineer that does all of our electronic voice phenomena if we happen to come across any, which we don't a whole lot. I don't use any of the phone apps. I find all the people using the phone apps come across EVPs quite frequently. Yeah. But you are going to see some studies come out from some of the universities on after-death communication that are going to talk about those apps and how they're designed to, listen to your conversations, generate words. So if you have your phone on you with that app downloaded, you're driving to, a haunted historical site, say a haunted fortress, for example, you're going to start getting words like gunshot, cannons, like that, because the app knows where you're going, and it can use all the different tools that our phones have, like our GPS, the compass, all that stuff. AI, exactly, now, especially with AI being integrated into everything. But I thought it was interesting you guys didn't sell it. That was going to be one of my questions is, at any point in time, do you guys plan on trying to sell this product for paranormal investigators to use?
We get it a lot.
A research
the interest in it is huge. I mean, we probably have, I don't know how many thousands of people on a list waiting for us to release something. Yeah. Two concerns that we have is, one, there are only 4 researchers involved, and the research isn't complete. That's problem 1. Problem 2 is, in order to turn around and sell something, that takes time. It takes free time to be able to set it up, make it available. We don't want to stop the research because it was never meant to be sold. We understand the desire for them to have it. We understand the fact that they want to get the results that Staticom is producing today, and we want that to happen. When that will occur, we can't answer that yet at this point.
Yeah, we do have a lot. And then the software component that we use is a Frankenstein's monster. If you were engineering sound for Beyonce's next hit, and not that I haven't tried, but she doesn't answer my calls. you wouldn't do some of the things that we've done fundamentally with settings, but we're doing something a little bit different, a little out of the box. So we did go that direction. So we would have licensing issues. We couldn't Geek Squad everybody who ever had a problem. There would be an onus of responsibility on the operator to both, use and troubleshoot. And again, it was not, as Tony said, it was not made to go to market. So we do get a lot of folks who are interested in doing it. And we had asked if we would put it into an app. And for reasons that you explained, because it has negative connotations to it, I would reject the idea of doing that. I'm also not on board necessarily. I've seen the apps at times produce things that were a little bit difficult to explain. I think I'm actually I've written one analytic white paper on stone tape theory and psychometry from an analytic idealist point of view. I'm working on one now that deals with the apps, because at times they do produce results that are really difficult to explain away. But I think it's by far the rarity that it does it. But through an idealist point of view, there is a possibility for ways that it could produce something that could be genuine. But it's really, really, really difficult to discern between deception and reception.
The processing power of a phone would never be able to handle what Staticom does. I mean, we're running the top of the line as far as processor speeds, RAM, all the configuration to get Staticom to function the way we wanted it to. And a phone processor would never be able to handle, nor does it have the technology to be able to do the things we have Staticom doing. So, yeah.
Well, Tony, speaking about the then apps and how they are lacking the scientific rigor, or perhaps they're not, since Dr. Elliott mentioned that those are apps produced by the universities, which should be something that people could be taking seriously. But what is the scientific implications? What is the science behind it? Tony, you said that your dad was teaching physics, right? He was a professor of physics.
Correct.
So was he saying? What is he saying about it? What is your and how do you agree with him or disagree with him on that?
Excellent question.
For years, that's an excellent question. The toughest questions I've ever had to answer in regards to when I started going down the ITC route, when he started seeing me trying to have communications, some of the toughest questions I had to answer in any podcast or anywhere else came from my father. And so it was a great learning experience, though, knowing what he was throwing at me, knowing where the philosophy behind materialistic science was coming from, where he was basing his information on versus where I was basing mine on. But the best part about it was that over the years and him watching the progress we've made from straight EVP to the different spirit boxes that we built up to the EVOX 2.0, he was quite enamored by what that thing could produce. But when we got into DRV and now Staticom, he's completely swung his entire outlook on how interested in. When I started talking about how we believe Staticom's working, and I was speaking to him about stochastic resonance, he's like, wait, what did you say? And the fact that I was using terminology that he clearly understood, that swayed his opinion, and he's had a change of heart, I think, about what it is.
So if what are the laws of physics behind this white noise if you remove then the radio aspect of it, when people used to claim before that they could hear the voices over certain frequencies, so FM or AM. But so what is the science behind the white noise? Why, in your opinion, you are more successful on getting the voices through white noise rather than through radio signals, through radio frequencies?
The reason for that is the philosophy behind how a spirit box works. A spirit box will scan at various speeds, forward or reverse, up and down the dial of the radio. So you're literally going, let's say, at 100 milliseconds, scanning through multiple stations. The philosophy behind how it worked was that spirits would take those fragments of radio and rearrange them into their own sentences, which was fine. Does the spirit box work? Yeah. But your responses are brief, and there's always seems to be an interruption of the communication. Now, through various tests, one I'll let Ron explain because him and Lourdes did it, and another one that we tested told us we did not need radio at all. In fact, when it hit a radio station, the communication with spirit, because they were only using white noise, was interrupting the communication process. So, Ron, you want to tell a story about the mind, and then I'll tell the one about the sleep, and we'll get into how Staticom was born.
Okay.
Sure. I mean, so one of the things that we preach is that for a lot of people who flood into this field through influence from TV, media, the internet, is to look at what's already been done, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and why. And there's got to be a level of reverence for the people who did what you do before you did it. And so I looked at a lot of that, and direct radio voice seemed to be the most efficient that I had seen done. And it was from a vacant radio station. So that, to me, was fascinating. I think the idea that the ghost box modality operates under, like Tony mentioned, has a lot of, it lacks empirical adequacy, because it's got the idea that they're putting words together through fragmentation of sounds, allophones and phonemes from the radio sweep. But you have to have certain sounds in certain places at certain times to form certain words. So they're moving these things around, somehow manipulating them in ways that no one's ever been able to explain at breakneck speeds with zero latency in process. To me, that has all kinds of internal contradictions. It doesn't really add up. But if you look at it from the other standpoint, so we're in a zinc mine, which is literally a geological Faraday cage below the surface of the earth with no radio or cell signal. And we were doing direct radio voice, and we got voices, responses, swearing at us, naming people. And so that made us realize that the carrier wave was not perhaps how the vocals were coming in. And as Tony mentioned, we believe now that even the spirit box modality uses stochastic or inverse stochastic resonance, where 20 hertz to 20,000 is the human hearing range. If any one frequency enters that and resonates with one of them, they gain amplitude. And then our process, we lop off through filtration the noise floor by the end of it. So what's left is anything that has risen above the noise floor, which is tends to be the vocals. So that told us that we didn't need radio reception. And so we ruled out anything we could do to vet the process. We didn't want to be fooling ourselves. So we look at what were the two main critiques that ITC had. First was you're getting stray radio voices. It's a legitimate concern. It can happen. I think with ghost boxes, a lot of times vocals on the radio can be mistaken for communication, and they're not.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is a real concern. So we remove the radio. The only other thing that really ITC gets as a criticism, which is also valid, was that when you're using white noise, because white noise is random, that we can always discern patterns in randomness. So from our perspective, I'll unpack that. To say that we can discern patterns in randomness, to me, is not a statement of debunkery. I think it's an appeal to our intellect, because that's how we communicate. We hear certain sounds contextually, referentially, inferentially, as communication in language that we know, and we identify it as speech. We don't ever hear the cackle, meow, 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 and go, oh, he wants to get in the car and get some more treats. So there is something with pattern recognition and an appeal to the intellect with that part of it. The other thing is that white noise, when they say it's random, I think in the paranormal community, I would dare say in the scientific community, it's an empty drawer. It's what we say when we cannot calculate or measure something at the time. White noise isn't fundamentally random, right? There could be charged ion particles involved, deterministic speech if we're communicating, quantum fields, electromagnetic fields. So it's not random. What it is computationally irreducible. At the moment, you're not able to calculate what those factors are. But when we have speech that we can through voice print, and we have had audio engineers analyze that these are in speed, cadence, the pacing of conversation, the tonal depth, diphthongs, consonants, vowels, it matches speech, and there is no radio reception, then that becomes a much, much larger task to try to explain away in some other dismissive way, like you're picking up stray radio.
I like that you cover. We have a question, and I'll ask you it here in a second. But I do like that you covered off a few different things here, because you covered off which is that, like you said, our brains are designed to interpret things and make sense of things. It's a survival mechanism, so we do it both visually and also auditory, which is one criticism about electronic voice phenomena. I like that you covered that off. I do also like that you talked about the spirit box and how I bought a SB Spirit Box 11 for my organization just to try it out. And of course, I don't use it. I find it extremely loud. It's really annoying for my audio engineer to sit there and try and actually like listen to the audio recording and see if there's an EVP in there. And like you said, for the only thing I do find the ones that where people get like 4 and 5 words in a row make sense. I do find those ones interesting, but for the most part, anytime I've ever used it, it's only been like one word, and I can tell it's coming from the radio. You can hear the announcer's excitement saying like, "Hey, welcome," things like that. So you can tell it's part of the radio. Now there are two other kind of explanations for EVP as well. One is that it's trying to make communication with us, which is what we all hope it is. The other one is interference, like you guys were talking about. I actually had a case where two guys were talking, doing the voice to voice on Facebook, not voice to text, but just sending each other the voice messages. And they ended up getting this like strange, deep male voice kind of coming over. Couldn't really make sense of what it was saying. You could just tell that it was another male's voice. At the time, I had a friend that was still working in the RCMP Tech Crime unit that was familiar with technology, so I had him analyze the clip for me, and it turned out to be crossover communication through Facebook. Some other communication somehow got crossed over to it. So I know that's one issue on why electronic voice phenomena are not considered empirical evidence of the afterlife, because there are all those other things that it could be. I do like the fact that you removed the radio part from it. There have been studies where they've caught EVPs in Faraday cages. Which is really interesting, because that means you cannot, for anyone listening that doesn't understand what Faraday is, it's a device that we used to use, for example, in the police force when examining cell phones. We would have to do it in a Faraday cage so that no signals can be sent or received, so that, i.e., somebody can't wipe out your cell phone remotely if you're looking for digital evidence. So there have been electronic voice phenomena caught in Faraday cages, which I find very interesting as well, because like I said, it's not sending or receiving any information. So
that's the other part too. When we get vocals that answer us, that are intelligible, we're not broadcasting out with any microphone apparatus whatsoever, and our system is closed circuit. It doesn't have a microphone for any audible input environmentally also. So you don't have the possibility of an AI interpreting something and responding, and you don't have the ability to receive a signal from outside of it. So we've had those, it's a trucker, it's a CB radio, it's a ham radio operator. They must be clairvoyant if, when I hold my glasses up and ask what I'm holding and they say glasses, to have been able to answer something where the mechanical sound wave that I'm making with my vocal cords, which only propagates so far, the cohesiveness of the air will thin it out, and yet there's a response that is timed and relevant to what I said, and multiple people hearing it at the same time. That's when it gets a little bit more interesting for us.
Well, so interesting that, speaking about the voice boxes, meaning that the actual voice box that we have, I know that you worked also in Japan and Philippines. So would they receive communication in their own language? Or did they get any communication in English while they were working in Japan or Philippines?
Well, we were investigating there, but yes, we received EVPs in English, Tagalog, Japanese, and Latin.
Where?
At the Diplomat Hotel in Baguio City.
And where is that?
It's in the northern part of north of Manila, but it's a well-known haunted location. My wife and I got permission to go in there. We had to have the governor give us written permission, because they didn't want people in there at night, but we got permission to go in, spend the night there. All those EVPs are listed on our YouTube channel. They can be watched. But like I said, we got English, Luckily, my wife speaks English, Japanese, and Tagalog, so we could get, it was the Latin one that we didn't know what was being said, so we had to analyze. They told us what was being said, and the funny part was that it actually did, with timing and relevance, answer the question that was asked, just not in the language we were able to decipher at that point.
And in the United States, what languages did you get?
Usually in the United States, we will get Tagalog because my wife can speak it. I don't think we've ever gotten Japanese, but I mean, we've had people come up to during a TDSI or the Digital Seance Initiative where we run Staticom live in front of an audience. Then we let them ask questions. We had a gentleman come up. I don't know if he was being sincere. I don't know if he was trying to see what would happen or how we'd handle it. But he came up and he asked a question in his Native American language. And the answer he got through Staticom, we didn't even know he got his answer, but was in the language he asked. And his face just dropped back. And we're like, did you get an answer? He goes, yeah, in my language. So it was.
Well, this is fascinating. Do you have your equipment now? Maybe we could do a little experiment.
You mean live?
Live, right. And I could be asking questions in different languages and see what
it
comes
can
through.
be done. The problem, StreamYard is the best source to do it from, but it requires a whole nother computer setup to have Staticom interface with what we're doing. But can it be done? Yes, it can.
So interesting. Perhaps we can schedule another time and actually do that in the live stream. So that's
Yes,
so
it
interesting.
can be
Dr.
done.
Elliott will be asking all sorts of questions.
Oh, I probably
Receiving
will. Yeah,
nothing.
I do have a couple of clips that I'm going to try and play tonight. Tony and Ron had sent me a couple of clips, so I picked out two short ones that we can. I'll try and play. Got a question for you, but first, you're listening to Science and Paranormal, and we're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and also on Roku TV. One of our guests, Thomas Donahue, asked a question. He said, have either of you guys seen better results or communications when people who claim to have abilities interact during a session? And then he says, Ron, he knows that you had an interesting session in Plymouth, Massachusetts that he saw. Yeah,
we've worked with mediums before, which we found is cross-validation, almost like the old cross-correspondences that were done in early EVP work. And it was fascinating because in one instance in Plymouth, there were a group of shaman who were at the event, and references to shamanistic things or the word shaman kept coming out. And then they went into this like chant, collectively holding hands, and then it seemed like there was a vocal that was matching what they were doing coming through the speaker. And there's another gentleman in New Jersey that we work with named Richard Marcello, who's a spirit artist. He draws what he sees. He's the essence of it. So during one of these digital seance events, when we're running Staticom, he will sit with a sketch pad and draw what he perceives spiritually. And he's turned the sketch pad to the audience before, and people will identify that as someone in their family they lost. They'll tell you who it was, and then it will match, it will correlate to information that we got running Staticom with regard to either the name, the occupation, the cause of death. So to link those things up for us was fascinating. But we have had instances like that were pretty inexplicable. The glasses explanation that I mentioned before, since I know you have a background in law enforcement, I did that in front of 3 police officers at an event in Morristown, New Jersey. And I was hoping to God I wasn't going to look like an idiot in front of the police department. But I said, what am I holding? And sure enough, a voice said glasses, and all 3 of them just stepped back and pointed.
You know, one clarification point, though, we've done the same thing, work with mediums. If the medium truly has the abilities they claim to have, it is a nice matchup. If they don't, we've literally had Staticom spit out the sentence, they have no ability. So
interesting.
If they're claiming to have abilities they don't, we've literally had Staticom call that out.
Well, the interesting thing is that on the other side of the veil, of course, in my personal experience and what I have heard and researched, they normally know who is a seer, who is not. This is very interesting to me. I don't know how they know, but they conglomerate to those people who do see, hear, and can sense. So perhaps if you get that answer that they don't have any ability, perhaps that they can see that that is the case.
Mhm.
Universal consciousness, we believe, is what they're accessing.
Well, if this
And
is a universal consciousness, then I heard you in those clips that you sent me, you address them as spirits. So is it the collective entity that you're trying to address, or did anything that come through that was of a particular kind, and not just the collective spirits, for example? Did they come by some sort of uh, specific name, classification, perhaps?
We
yeah,
have
we've asked names and gotten first and last, which doesn't happen all the time. But I think there was even maybe I don't know if that clip was sent, but yeah, we've had voices, spirit, entity, whatever you want to call it, consciousness, identify themselves by a first and last name.
Yeah, and we also, in the idea of universal phenomenal consciousness, that we feel that we're dissociative alters of, or fractal broken off parts of, but one universal mind. A lot of times they will identify with a name, sometimes not. But I think in a lot of instances, like when we refer to communication and we use a word like spirit, I think oftentimes language compels us to use words, proper nouns, to label things for the purposes of discussing them. And we see this in language all the time. Like when we lecture, we'll say that this is a fist, and we name it that. So it has standalone identity as a thing, but now it's gone. So it really was not a thing. It was a doing. This was a behavior of the field of subjectivity. It was not something that had standalone existence. Right. So when we say spirit, we're identifying the communication at the time, maybe with the voice that we got that may have a different sound or tone from other ones. But we think that where it's coming from as an origin point, the ontological primitive, we believe, is universal phenomenal consciousness.
Did you ever try to, that's a strange word to say, conjure, or just call something forth, let's just say, call something forth that you particularly were interested in?
I've had that with my mother. She passed in 2019. I've had recordings that I thought could be, I'll never say I know for sure, because I don't know for sure. Right. Mm-hmm. And since every observation and every statistical thing that we do is subjective, objectivity would be, your thoughts are objective to me, but mine and my experiences are subjective. That's an unavoidable, it's an insoluble problem from a research point of view. Mm-hmm. So I believed it was my mother. And there was an instance when we asked for her and a voice said, "Hey, Florence," which is her name, "it's your son." And that was staggering to me. Other instances, I've been sitting, playing with the sound quality, trying to improve it. And Lourdes would come downstairs from sleeping to get a glass of water. And a voice will come out of the speaker and go, "Hi, Lourdes," as she enters the room and hasn't said anything. So, yeah, there are instances when there have been very profound moments that were personal like that.
Did you notice by chance that with bringing forth those entities, did you see any residual remaining energy after you ended what is it called, the session? Session. Okay.
It's really hard to identify when we are doing Staticom communication. It's two-way. Residual would not have the ability to interact. Therefore, if something's said, we may be able to catch that it was something out of place, not from a timing or relevant standpoint to what we were talking about, and we may be able to identify it as residual that way. But because we can't ask something residual a question and get an intelligent response, there's no true communication. Something might be said, and I think Ron and Lourdes have gotten a few things that they knew and were able to identify this was residual. It didn't interact. There was no intelligence behind it. It was some randomly stated statement that came out of nowhere. And I think, if I remember correctly, Lourdes said it even started over right after a while. I can't remember correctly. But the problem with identifying residual is that there's no interaction. There's no two-way communication. So if something is said, we'd have to literally go through reviewing it with that aspect that we're looking for something that was said that didn't make any sense to what we were talking about.
And just to clarify too, because I wasn't sure, to be honest, if Dr. Yana was speaking to residual evidence as far as hearing something, or residual energy post
energies. Right,
Post-session
energies.
effect. Okay.
Post session, because there will be, you will shut down your equipment, and then if you sensed any energies that were still remaining in a room.
We have not. I've not had that experience of any post session energy. I think it's a great question because how people understand the possibilities of how this might happen leaves it open to that kind of a thing. We won't, just from to give you an idea from our perspective with Staticom, we will not, on the strength of anomalous voices, deem any location haunted because it's not enough of a criterion to do so, and we can get them anywhere.
That's very interesting and very, very valid point.
Yeah, no, I like that point. I also like the other point that you mentioned too, that when you're talking to somebody, you said that, I assume that they are who they say they are, because a lot of mediums will actually say that as well. They're not 100% sure who they're talking to. Usually they can tell whether the person's a male or female or a non-human entity because of the energy and the vibrations that they're feeling. But they're also relying on the information that they're receiving from the other side to be truthful.
Right.
Now, I have heard some mediums say that they have to be truthful on the other side, yet you look at demonic cases, for example, where they lie and they mislead and they pretend to be children to gain the trust of other children. So very, very fascinating that you guys have those same cautious approaches, which I really like.
There's a lot of, I'm sorry, I was going to say there's a lot of in the field what we call spiritual bypassing. There's a lot of the ghosts just know how to do it. They just do that. They just know this. And we don't like to lean on those things. If we can't in some way, at least if it doesn't meet a prima facie level of plausibility where we can at least support why we think it, we don't approach it. And there are a lot of instances like ghosts just know how to use the app. They just know how to move the letters around on a ghost box. To me, that lacks explanatory power, and I'll shy away from that kind of a thing. What we speak to, we feel like we can at least support with what we know, what we can empirically ground it in what our experiences are. And even if we're wrong, we're not creating theoretical entities. Like if you think Occam's razor, we're not creating things for the purposes of explaining something to fill in these gaps in explanation.
Very interesting. I've got a few clips I'm going to try and play for our audience here. So I've got 4 of them that I picked out. The first one, because of my background in law enforcement, is the no cops one. Can you guys tell me the background story on that one?
Take it, Steve.
Sure. We were in 1820s home in North Carolina. It was the entire EVPI team, all 6 of us, because it was run by 2 of our paranormal counterparts. So all we asked was, what's your favorite part of the house? I think Lourdes asked a question, and she literally said, what room? Now, this house was on 5,000 acres. It was in the middle of nowhere. At that time, coming out by horse would have taken half a day or more to get cops out there. So we didn't even think about that. So this answer was something that we had to literally review, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they did answer the question. They answered it perfectly. But this is not anything anyone was thinking about, because we were asking, what's your favorite part of the house? What room? And that's what's in this clip.
Okay, let's play it.
What's your favorite part of this house? What room?
Very fascinating. The next clip that I picked out was called "Energy of Your Mind." What's the background story of that? I find that clip very interesting as well.
Well, I have been fascinated. Like Ron said, we don't broadcast our voice. It's not going out. Signal's not being transmitted anyway. I'm speaking as I'm speaking right now, but without mics, without cameras, just in my house. The next thing to think about was when I'm speaking, I'm creating vocal sound waves, which travel in the atmosphere, and then human ears have follicles which pick up those waves, vibrate, that signal gets transmitted to the brain reinterprets it as speech, and it's heard. If a spirit is supposedly energy and they don't have ears, how do they hear me speak? That's what I wanted to know. That's what I ask, and you'll hear the response.
Mm-hmm. Let's play
How
it.
do you hear me speak?
Now, this was a fascinating response because before Staticom, before direct radio voice, we were heavily into EVPs. And a lot of times when doing EVP sessions, the answer would show up on the recorder before I even finished asking the question.
Yep.
This answers that, solves how that can happen. They're not getting it from me vocally expressing it. They're getting it from the energy of the mind, which to us is consciousness, which goes to universal consciousness, and that's how they're
right.
Now,
which is
sorry,
very
Ron,
interesting because that's
now we started to bombard the
we're all
questions.
fighting. We're all fighting for the airtime. No,
Yeah.
it is very interesting because that's what the survival theory is that human consciousness and personality somehow survives bodily and clinical death. And that was the answer that you received, which is interesting because that is the leading theory in survival.
Right. If you approach it from a physicalist standpoint and go with laws of physics, right, you're getting an answer that's super luminous. It's faster than the speed of light because it's there the second you complete or just before. So if you look at this from a consciousness perspective, if we are dissociated but part of a universal phenomenal consciousness, then that sound or what we're interpreting, we're getting because it's modulated into our sensory input. What we're getting is not traversing any distance like a mechanical sound wave. It's already there.
Right.
And that's the thing that we try to speak to, too, because that's another thing that there's a lot of axiomatic thoughts in the paranormal that get passed along like Thanksgiving turkey as a tradition without being questioned. Spirits can see and hear without eyes and ears.
Put two bears together, creates a portal. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you think about that, why would we, through billions of years of evolution, develop ocular and visual systems if, as spirits, which we have inside of us, we could see and hear without those things? We would eradicate deafness and blindness because we have spirit inside of us, according to the same people who say that spirits can do these things, right? But if you think about, like, when we hold up something, go, what am I holding? And they don't have eyes, it stands to reason, again, if we're connected to a universal consciousness, that they're grokking that information from our contribution to consciousness. Not our consciousness, but through our consciousness.
Through, right.
Well, it is interesting as well that people that do have disabilities, such as being blind or deaf, have reported when they've been dead and having a near-death experience, but they're actually clinically dead at the time. They actually report that they're able to see and able to hear again. And then, of course, they're brought back, and that's how we learn about those experiences, especially through the work of Dr. Sam Perina and all of that he's done there with Project Aware. Yana, did you have a question before I play another clip?
Yes, I would like to come back briefly to the previous clip that you played. In that sense, it sounds, in fact, pretty easy to get the answer and a pretty valid and substantiated answer to your question. Now, when you get those answers, for example, the last one that you got about death, did you ask for the name of the person and where or person or the entity or where that entity came from, and how do they know the answers to that?
I don't think we've ever asked, how do you get this information? We've asked where they're at, and they'll give answers like you wouldn't understand. We can't explain. Plus, the whole concept of time, space are all human concepts, that human creations. To them, that none of that exists. So when you start talking about location, where are you at? If that doesn't exist for them, that would be very hard for them to explain.
Well, maybe that would be very interesting also for us to know where they reside, and perhaps we can know the hierarchies or even the places that exist there that we don't know. And even if they think that we would not understand, as researchers, perhaps we should get to that information and not just be happy with their answer. Oh, you're not going to understand. Oh, no, I will. So be kind to reveal that information.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. The other limiting factor for us is, like I said, there's only 4 of us. We all work full-time jobs. But I mean, even just like questions, there's probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of questions. People always say, hey, did you ask how the pyramids were built? Did you ask if Atlantis actually existed? I mean, and I can just go on and on and on and on down hundreds of thousands, millions of.
Of course, but my question is to follow up. Like I'm speaking like we're humans. To follow up with that entity, and just to see. I'm not minimizing the importance. I want you to understand that it's just that sometimes it's difficult to even to put a name on it. So maybe to follow up with questions at the time that entity is there and ask. And essentially to interrogate, to have the series of questions, where they come from, where they get this information, or what kind of entity that is. So maybe just for the future research, perhaps I would be very interested in that. Perhaps maybe not to only rely on what kind of entities just come or choose to come your way to communicate, or maybe to follow up or have the follow-up questions for the same entity and see where that can lead you to essentially to take charge of the session.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
I love the idea. I'll tell you that one of the reasons why we've done a little bit of that in our sessions here in New Jersey. One of the reasons why we didn't dive too deep into that rabbit hole is because we didn't want to get trapped in some kind of circular reasoning also. If approaching this as analytic idealism, with consciousness being the substrate for reality, and then most people will subscribe to the idea that time, space, like Tony said, are not a thing for spirits or the spirit realm, that's a human construct. So you'll still have people in the paranormal field who want to know what the ghost frequency is. So frequency is what? It's measures of oscillations per unit of time. So if they don't have units of time, you're not going to have an exact match in frequency because you don't have the same measuring stick by which to draw that parallel.
True, but at the same time, they come to talk not to those entities that are equal to themselves. They come to talk to you, which you don't have, of course, what they say that you will not understand, or the concept of time in which they exist. They come to you, so they would be able to explain it to you. It's just, of course, I'm coming from a practical standpoint, and that would be very interested in finding out the further research that you gentlemen do.
I love the idea.
Yeah.
That's very interesting too, because time, as we know it, is a man-made or human, construct.
Right. Well, time is what? Time is the appearance of cognitive proximity, as is space. Right. So, and what is experience? Experiential is something that you have. Experience is something you have as a conscious entity, as a sentient being. So consciousness has to have primacy over space-time. Space-time is not the scaffolding upon which reality rests, because experience has to come before the thing that describes it.
Right.
It is an amazing concept. It's just fascinating. We're definitely going to have you guys back on the show again. So many more questions. The next clip, I think it's entitled "I Am Somebody Consciousness." What's the story behind that one?
This is one of those times when they handed us they lost us a softball. Yeah, this was the golden ticket at Willy Wonka. We didn't ask for this, but the voice says, "I am I am a consciousness. I am consciousness," and then it also identifies as Tony's friend. So I cannot tell you how many times Tony and or the word Rathman have come through here. If it happens anymore, I could probably put him on my taxes. If they could get an idea at the level that this happens. But this was interesting. And so it loops at the end. It only said it the one time, but it names somebody who I'm partners with in the research for one. That's very timed and relevant, especially relevance. And consciousness was one of the clearest things I've ever heard come out of any electronic mechanism on this clip. So I was kind of stunned when I heard it.
All right, let's play it.
Consciousness will be very I have already life. Already. Consciousness will be very I have already life. Already. Consciousness.
I love
Very,
that one.
very
Love that
fun.
one.
The last clip I picked, I think it's DRV, Mom, and Lucy. What's the story behind that one?
Okay, so this, if I'm not mistaken, this is the one. So I mentioned that this is an ITC first. Never in the history of instrumental transcommunication before us had somebody slowed down the flow of live white noise. And we did it in such a way, if you've ever played a musical instrument and you know what 16th notes go like, that, right? If you took that same pacing, but you did it in quarter note speed, it's not elapsing a longer period of time. You're not making 15 minutes into 30. But the flow of it within the confines of that time frame is elongated a little bit. So not to distort, but enough to make it comprehensible. Because the pioneers of EVP research in Europe had said that these voices not only come in faster than we can detect them, they come in faster than the human vocal tract is capable of speaking. So if I'm not mistaken, this is the one that it's 50% slowed down. This is the impetus for us to slow it down in real time. No human being, Lourdes is a court reporter by trade, so she hears people talking at different speeds, cadences, dialects over each other. Nobody human can talk that fast that this came through in real time. I don't care if it's an auctioneer on cocaine. They're not doing it.
The other point too, Ron, is that when this was first recorded, you didn't hear anything. You thought you heard something different.
Yes,
when we slowed it down, then you got the full message that was there. That was why we took the steps to slow down live white noise in real time with Staticom, because of the ITC pioneer saying that sometimes it comes through so fast. So Staticom literally does that slowing in real time when we run it so that we don't miss anything.
All right, let's give it a listen.
You know who I am? It's turned on. Is my mother gonna be here tonight?
So is it supposed to be your mom, Ron?
My mother's name was Florence, but her mother's name was Lucy. So when she said Ronnie, it's mom, it's Lucy, which I've had those two names come through together at other times since then. But that was the first time. And all I heard, like Tony said, was the word on. And then you hear me sounding intoxicated, which I assure you was not the case.
Right.
No, you could tell you had to slow it down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But that was why, and this is what Tony mentioned, this is why it's important to have reverence and awareness of what people did before you, successfully or failingly, because that was when the light clicked in my head. I had read that and researched that a long time before. But all of a sudden, I get this voice that's slowed down, is completely enunciated clear, and I missed it. And I went, how much could we be missing in real time all the time because of the speed that the vocals seem to be coming in?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So we have a few minutes left. One question is, without giving away like your proprietary stuff, obviously, why do you have to? So do you guys always slow the white noise down or no?
Yes.
Okay, so you always slow it down. And why do you have to use the software that you guys use instead of just being able to like use for example, I have a white noise machine. I have tinnitus from policing. So every night I turn on my white noise and it plays. Why can't you just use like a device like that and have something recorded without running it through like software and slowing it down and things like I can see why the slowing down part in this instance, because you would have missed that communication. But
if I can
that's been burning me.
If I can address it first, and then I know Tony will add to this with some value. So when we began, Lourdes and I began resurrecting direct radio voice in 2019, that's exactly what we did. We sat with a long wave or short wave vacant channel with no radio emissions and just played it and recorded it. And eventually we had gotten some EVPs from the audio support that the white noise would give through the resonance in the room. Then vocals started coming out of the radio. We have some captures that are extremely clear that had no software, no live filtration. We did this partly because a gentleman named Keith Clark from Varanormal.com had introduced Lourdes and I to the idea of filtration live. And then what we found out is that we believe in a lot of the instances when pioneers of ITC had explained that there were gaps in communication, timeframes within which they would get no voices for months or years. We think perhaps because if the atmospheric conditions did not provide substantial or enough sufficient resonance to make the vocals audible because they are outside of our sensory perception, then that would give the appearance of not having any communication. So what we're doing is we're availing them to the white noise without ambient interference. Our system's closed circuit, and we're slowing it down to make it more discernible. But that would be my answer.
Yeah.
So interesting, because that would be speaking about the white noise. Of course, on the radio, this is after the thunderstorm and lightning. This is normally the white noise appears on its own on the radio. But you're talking about the without the radio, and that makes it even more interesting.
Yeah, it's a generator that creates the white noise in real time. So it's live white noise. Tony has a story besides us getting voices in a zinc mine. Tony used a sleep machine, which is pre-recorded on a chipcorder. And how did that turn out?
Well, we did a couple of tests prior, trying to replicate different versions of white noise. I recorded running water, fans, air conditioners. I hung mics out of my, taped them to my car when I drove around so I could get that wind noise. I could pull voices from all of it. The problem is that there was no consistency in the level of the white noise. If a car went by you or something, that would increase it. So the nice part about a white noise generator is it's got a spectral frequency of 1, meaning every frequency stays at the same level from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, which when the stochastic or inverse stochastic resonance was applied to the frequencies that were overlapped by the voice, we could then cut off the underlying and leave just the voice. So it worked out very, very well.
We have gotten to such an interesting conversation right now, particularly for me about the frequencies. Right at the very end, we have to have you guys back because
I agree. Gotta have you back for another episode.
We'd be honored to do it. We were honored to be here tonight, so we would be honored to do it. We appreciate this very much.
Yeah, thank you.
That would be wonderful, and thank you for creating it and working on that. And I know that it's not always easy, and it takes so much time, but it is worth it. And so many people are interested in it, and they're supporting you as well.
What's the best spot for our listeners to get in touch with you guys if they have any questions or want to follow your work or anything like that?
We both have websites, entityvoices.com. Ron and Lourdes have Gonyak. Paranormal.com. We can be found on Facebook, Ron Yacovetti, Tony Rathman. And then if they're looking for more evidence of what Staticom's been able to capture, we have, if you go to YouTube and just put in Staticom, you'll come right to the page with, I don't know how many hundreds of clips of evidence are on.
Awesome. I'll have to give you a like and a subscribe on YouTube.
We appreciate it very much. We do.
We do.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. It was a pleasure. I'll be in touch with you guys and get you back on the show for sure. And
sounds great.
Thank you to all our listeners. You were listening to Science and the Paranormal, broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM out of New Orleans and also on. And we will see everybody next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday. Have a good night, everyone.
You
Bye.
too.
Take care, guys.
Good night. Thank you.